wonderful story for you. This one is from Matt Stoller, our partner at Breaking Points, and he's the author of the Substack. It's called Big, always following like anti-monopoly issues and a great critique of corporate power. And he wrote this piece. It's not that long, and it really is a work of art, so I want to read it to you. The headline here from Big is Amazon promotes ex-private prison executive to run their warehouse training. I mean, in some ways, the headline doesn't say it all, but I'm going to read on. Meet executive Dana Howard, who's in charge of learning and development for warehouse employees. He says it's always fun to keep an eye on Amazon's internal personnel moves because they speak to the general culture of the pace-setting firm in American retail and commerce. And he points out that Dana Howard is now the head of training for warehouse workers after having started at a private prison corporation. She says at Amazon, she came to their global security group and then their loss prevention team, which is to say she ran their efforts to stop employees and contractors from stealing. All of this is reasonable if distasteful. Theft in retail is a problem, and having internal security is a clear need for a firm like Amazon. But what is surprising is that Howard was then promoted to run their learning and development team, which is Amazon's internal training program for all warehouse workers. Nothing illegal about any of this, but Howard's career path does give us some perspective on how Amazon executives understand those who did not attend college and what they are good for. To be fair to Howard, you're going to like this part too, she also made sure to run lean-in circles for women in security at Amazon. The retail giant wants everyone to know, as it makes clear in this video, that it values diversity in its de facto prison guard unit. There's a metaphor in here somewhere.
Yeah, they just want to put the veneer of progressivism over, like, near slave driving.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, literally taking a lady who, like, improved efficiency at a private prison corporation and putting her in charge of not just, like, loss prevention and trying to, like, root out employees who are stealing socks or whatever, but now she's in charge of their training regimen, like, putting them... it's really something.
By the way, if you ran a private prison to get it to be more quote-unquote efficient, I think it is fair to say you were the closest thing that we have in modern day to a slave driver. That's because that's what we effectively have, legalized slavery in prisons. And especially at private prisons, where what they do, like, they'll make them work and they'll pay them nothing or next to nothing. And they take those goods and they pass them off and make some sort of a profit in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in charge of, like, I'm going to dot the I's and cross the T's and, to mix metaphors here, make the trains run on time or whatever. Yeah. Like, that's what you're doing. You're like a slave driver. Yes. So it's bringing that mentality into Amazon to make it, like, ruthlessly efficient and disciplined.
Well, and it's putting the workers in the mold of the prisoners that she was dealing with before.
Yeah. Which, by the way, there is a metaphor in there somewhere,
Absolutely.
right? Absolutely.
And she brags about on her LinkedIn page that during her time at Corrections Corporation of America, which has now changed their name because they were involved in so many scandals and became so toxic they had to shift their name, she says she, quote, revamped inmate admission process and revised all processing documentation, resulting in a 20% reduction in inmate processing time and a reduced error rate. Stoller's commentary is that she was apparently good at designing systems to herd prisoners. So naturally, she went to Amazon.
Yeah, I don't think people really understand how terrible private prisons are. I mean, it's one of a few things that 100% does not belong in the marketplace.
Yes.
You cannot have a profit incentive in prisons because if you stop and think about it for a few seconds, you realize they are incentivized to try to get more butts in more beds.
That's exactly
And
right.
so you're setting up this incentive to want to lock more people up for things perhaps crossing the line into things that shouldn't be crimes.
Right.
And that's why, for example, it was the private prison industry that lobbied to get the 3-strike law in California, where it doesn't matter how minor those three, I don't know if it's three, I think it's 3 felonies.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how minor those felonies are. If you have 3 felonies, you're gone. You're going to get locked up for good. Obviously, the drug war is something that massively has helped private prisons because you're locking up non-violent offenders for things, again, that shouldn't be crimes to, I think, most reasonable people.
Well, it shows the failures of a lot of, like, neoliberal market-obsessed thinking, because the rationale for this was like, oh, well, the government can't do anything, so let's let the markets handle it, and the private prison corporations will be more efficient, and so they'll save taxpayers money. But all the research says that's not what happens at all. Just like you said,
but even if it did, I don't care. That's not good. It's still not good. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Yeah.
But their whole incentive is to bilk the taxpayers for more money by, like you said, by expanding the mass incarceration state. And so that's instead what happens. And then, of course, they skimp on any sort of care for inmates. They also try to cherry pick which inmates they end up having because, they don't want any that have any mental health issues or any physical or health problems. So it's a disgusting, grotesque, immoral place to be trying to turn a profit. And of course, Amazon looked at that industry and said, let's take from there. Let's recruit from there.
They also, and I remember because I've covered this in the past, to cut costs, they will serve stale and moldy food. And there's been these nightmare stories of these, entire, cell blocks getting sick because they were eating stuff that was obviously not good anymore.
Yes.
And this is the kind of stuff that you're dealing with. They're going to skimp as much as possible, and they're going to try to turn a profit. They're going to try to lock more people up. Yeah. It really does speak to a crisis of neoliberalism. You can't privatize everything. You can't do. I mean, mercenary armies are another example of this. It's like Blackwater. You got this Christian nationalist who's running this private army that you sent to Iraq, and they didn't follow the same laws that our troops were required to follow, which is how you get the Nisour massacre, for example, where they gunned down all these civilians.
Yes.
It's when you privatize everything, this is what happens. What's next? What do you want to privatize? You want firemen to be privatized?
Some places have done that.
And by the way, what happens when you do that?
It's a disaster.
Things start burning down, and it's, you didn't pay your bill.
Yeah. There are some core areas that should be outside of the profit motive. And this is actually a good transition to get into a conversation with Vivek. But think about the healthcare system. Think about education, right? Think about prisons. Think about basic public services. Think about national security. These are all areas where there are other goals in mind, where the profit incentive is just going to create terrible results and end up creating situations that's the opposite of the goals the population would ultimately have. The healthcare system is a perfect example of this. All of these gritty goals that profit off of illness, what they make the most money off of is people being chronically sick. And so what do we have in America? We have a lot of people who are chronically sick. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how all of that happens.
All right, guys, what you just saw is a little teaser clip from Krystal, Kyle, and friends. You can check out the entire podcast. It was an awesome conversation with Professor Vivek Chibber, and he is brilliant. He's a socialism expert, and he gets really into detail with us. And if you want to check out the entire podcast, go ahead and sign up on Substack, and you pay $5 a month, and you get the video of all of the podcasts, and you get them a day early. You also get our newsletters. For everybody else, if you want, you can listen for free to the audio podcast version. But remember, we take zero ad dollars for this podcast. Never had a conversation with an advertiser our entire time doing it. Very proud of that fact. It's all because of the people on Substack who support us. So thank you to everybody who already does support us. And if you don't, please consider it. Love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. If you want to see me and Krystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take zero ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.